When I see people online talking about Sandbox versus Railroad D&D games, they often talk about Sandbox games like the most beautiful thing ever, that all DMs should aspire to run games like, whatever. And they talk about Railroad games like the epitome of a bad game and a bad dungeon master, but that is very far from the truth. See, they're more like just different styles of playing the game. So, what is a sandbox? That is where it is completely player-driven. There's no necessarily overarching story that is pushing the players. They can have unique and different settings that they are put in, but everything is determined by the players and the decisions they make. So, to compare to video games, this would be things like Minecraft, Ark, Survival Evolved, and Mountain Blade. I would even throw Valheim in there. Those would be sandbox games. There's not necessarily a story that is driving the players. They have different objectives maybe in each of the games, and in something like Minecraft, the player really identifies what the objective is, and then in Mountain Blade, it's a sandbox game because there isn't really a story. There is just a war going on, and you can pick what sides you want to join, but it's all up to you. It's driven by you. You can start your own nation, you can join another nation, it's whatever you want to do. So, then what is a railroad game? Again, to compare to video games, this would be something like Halo. In Halo, your decisions don't really matter. You do a mission, you get a cutscene, you do another mission, and there is just the story. You can't explore the world. There's not really much else going on. It is just the story. And again, the downside to that is there's often not a lot of decisions to be made, or at least not any meaningful decisions to be made. The people that are going to die no matter what you do, and the people that are going to live are going to live. So why is that a bad thing for Dungeons & Dragons? Because in D&D, the players should have an impact on the story that is happening around them, and a lot of players don't like playing games where they don't really have a say and none of their decisions matter. If you are running a fully railroaded campaign where you had all of the players, their classes, the wizard's spells all pre-picked out, you knew what feats they were going to get on each of their level ups, then the players would basically be voice actors in the Dungeon Master story, and I don't know of any players that actually would want to play in that campaign, because that sounds pretty lame. But, like I said, that would be a fully railroaded story. I think where the issue comes in, and where I disagree with a lot of people, is I think it's more of a spectrum, and how much of it is railroaded versus how much is sandbox, open-ended for the players to drive. Take a game like Skyrim. It has very linear adventures in a sandbox setting. And it starts off somewhat railroaded. Well, it starts off very railroaded, in that you have to go through the tutorial. The only decision you really have to make is which person you want to go with, but it doesn't have any consequences because you can still join the Stormcloaks or the Imperials later on. And so you don't have any meaningful decisions. But once you get out of that intro area, then you can do whatever you want. So, like I said, it's somewhat of a spectrum as far as how much of it is railroaded versus how much of it isn't railroaded, or I should say how much of it is planned and predetermined versus how much of it is driven by the players. And for example, when I run a railroad campaign, when the players come aboard my train, I don't tell them what cart they need to stay in, where they need to sit, who they can talk to. Like, while they're on the train, it's all up to them what they want to do. But it's like, hey, we're going to the next station. And so I view plot points as this metaphorical train station. And so we have different places that we're going to head to. And so the last adventure that they went on, there was a pit. I didn't have a predetermined way that they were supposed to solve getting across this 20-foot long pit in the cave. They had to be creative and come up with a solution to that. Then there were other decisions that had impact, but at the end of the day, they completed the mission. We got to the next train station. I also like to periodically bring the train to a stop, let everyone get off, and pursue personal goals through downtime and other stuff like that. But when everyone is ready, we hop back on the train and we continue to push the story forward. But that's how I run these more railroaded campaigns. We have a story that we're following. The players still have impact in the story. They still have meaningful decisions to make, but there is a kind of planned out path and outcome because we need to get to the end destination. Now, If decisions are great, and it sounds like I'm just continuing to add more decisions to my, my railroad, why not just get rid of the tracks entirely and run a sandbox campaign? Well, there's a couple reasons. One of those reasons are that some players will complain about being railroaded, but then you drop them in a sandbox campaign and then they sit there waiting for a train. They don't know what they're supposed to do. And the reason for that is because they're not supposed to do anything. They get to do whatever they want. But they're like, what's going to be more fun? Where should I head? Tell me what to do. And they want direction. They just don't want to be micromanaged when they pick a direction. But again, you just pull that scope during a railroaded adventure out, and they don't have to be micromanaged. The other is that the more open the world, the harder it is to prep. So not all dungeon masters have the time to run a sandbox game. If you run a very linear railroaded adventure or campaign, then you only have to plan and prep things along that path. But the more decisions you allow to heavily impact the story and the direction they go, the more you have to plan. And obviously, with a sandbox campaign, they can go wherever. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. You have to prep a bunch of different interesting adventures that they can go on or situations because you don't know what they're going to pick and where they're going to go. Another thing kind of along those same lines is there's not very many pre-written modules that can be ran as a sandbox. I can actually only think of one, and that's Curse of Strahd. And that's because you can prep everything in Barovia, and you can just be like, hey, here's the setting and the situation, there's the evil vampire and blah, blah, blah. What are you going to do? You're going to try to get home? You're just going to live there? You're going to try to kill him? Like, it's up to the players as far as what they do and how they go about it. And so that's the only pre-written adventure that I can think of that can be ran as a sandbox. So at this point, you might be asking, what should I do? Should I try to run more of a sandbox? Should I run more of a railroad? And honestly, the other reason that you may not go for one or the other is that different players like different things. Some players like more direction and knowing what they're supposed to do. Other players like not being given any direction and having the freedom to go wherever they want. So understand your table and what they want to do. Understand what you also have the capacity to take on. But I will say, if you're going to run a railroad-style adventure, first off, don't railroad them at a micro level. Let them overcome challenges how they want. The second piece to that is don't keep them on your story or on your train by making everything else just look boring. Make your story the most fun thing. Make your train so fun to be on that they don't want to leave it to explore other parts of the world because they're bored. Well, if you made it this far, consider subscribing for more content, liking this video, and I will see you next time.